This chapter is covering the heart. So the first thing we need to look at is the overview of the cardiovascular system. Remember that the cardiovascular system contains not only the heart, but it also contains the blood vessels that transport blood between the heart and the body tissues. When we talk about blood vessels, first thing we need to remember is that arteries always carry blood away from the heart. So away is your key word to remember as far as the type of blood that's in arteries, whereas veins are always going to carry blood back towards the heart. So the key word that you want to remember there is toward. Then the next group of blood vessels that we have is called capillaries. These are the smallest of the blood vessels, and they are the sites for exchange between the blood and the alveoli, which is in the lungs, and then also between the blood and the systemic cells, which is what we call the systemic circuit. So the arteries and veins, they enter and leave the heart. Those specific ones are very large blood vessels, and they are called the great vessels. And they're located just superior to the heart in a cavity called the media stinum. The great vessels, the names for them are the aorta. The aorta is going to pump blood to the systemic circuit, and it receives blood that comes out of the left ventricle, whereas the pulmonary trunk is right next to the aorta, but its job is to pump blood to the pulmonary circuit, and it receives blood that comes out of the right side of the heart, and specifically, it would be the right ventricle that leads to the pulmonary trunk. The other important characterization about blood vessels is that blood flow is always going to be unidirectional. The heart itself is what we call a dual pump, so it has two side-by-side pumps, and the right side of the heart is going to be responsible for the pulmonary circuit, and it includes the right atrium and the right ventricle. So it is one pump. The other pump is the left side of the heart, and it is called the systemic circuit and involves the two chambers on the left side of the heart called the left atrium and the left ventricle. One of the things that the heart does is it generates the blood pressure through the alternate contraction and the relaxation of the ventricles. We're not really going to talk too much about blood pressure in this chapter, but it's basically the force of blood pushing against the inside of blood vessel walls. And obviously, it's essential to circulate blood throughout the body. So let's talk about the pulmonary and systemic circuits. The pulmonary circuit is the right side of the heart, so it includes the two chambers, the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it pumps deoxygenated blood through the pulmonary arteries to the capillaries in the lungs. Deoxygenated means that it has a low amount of oxygen in it and more carbon dioxide than it. After it picks up the oxygen and releases the carbon dioxide, it then travels into pulmonary veins, which carry blood to the left side of the heart. So remember that veins go towards the heart, and in this case, they now have oxygenated blood going back to the left side of the heart. The systemic circuit is going to be because of the left side of the heart, and it includes the left atrium and left ventricle. In this case, it pumps oxygenated blood through the systemic arteries to the systemic capillaries. So it's going to deliver nutrients, respiratory gases, and waste back through the systemic veins to the right side of the heart. So again, remember that the veins are always going to go towards the heart. So this is an overview of the cardiovascular system. We can see the job of the heart here. The two pumps are shown. This is one pump. It's the right side of the heart. This is another pump, which is the left side of the heart. So the basic pattern of blood flow is if we begin with the right side of the heart, it doesn't really matter what side you begin on, but the right side of the heart is going to conduct, it's going to take deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And then the left side of the heart then is going to take oxygenated blood to the entire system. So the position of the heart is shown on these next few slides. The position of the heart is located slightly left of the midline of the body, deep to the sternum, in a space called the mediastinum. The heart is going to be slightly rotated. The right border is a little more anteriorly, and the left border is more posteriorly. The base of the heart, in this case, is the posterior superior surface, and it's mainly the left atrium. The superior border of the heart is formed by the great arterial vessels and the superior vena cava. And finally, the apex is actually going to be the inferior conical end, which kind of comes to it's going to be at the anterior inferior left side of the body. And the inferior border is going to form the right ventricle. So when we look at the heart, the apex is going to be pointing sort of towards your left lower hip. So this slide is showing us the position within the thoracic cavity. I want you to notice the basic location of the heart here. We see the superior border, which is going to be primarily the right atrium. Notice that the heart sits on the diaphragm, which is that primary muscle used for respiration. And then the lower corner of the heart is the conical end called the apex, and that's going to point towards your left hip. Over here on this image, we can see the right atrium. That's going to be where the base of the heart is. And the left ventricle is going to be where the apex of the heart is. On this image, we can see a transverse section that is shown over here, and it's taken through the base of the heart, which notices where the right atrium is. So again, the right atrium is going to be at the base of the heart, whereas the apex of the heart, which is labeled on this diagram, is going to be the pointed region of the heart. Over here on this image, we can see much of the same thing. You can see the heart shown in the anterior region of the thoracic cavity, and in the posterior region of the cavity, we can see a cross-section of one of the great vessels, which is the descending aorta in this case, just because the slice of it is the point at which the aorta starts to descend to go towards the abdominal cavity. The part of the aorta which goes in a superior direction, right after it comes out of the heart, would be just superior to where the section was actually taken.